Alright, someone asked me to film this brake job this time, so I'm going to have to rattle through this because we're running out of daylight, but we're going to change the pads on this. First of all, I'm going to take these fake bolts out and then loosen these wheel nuts. Key wheel nut. Loosen the wheel nut. It's going to jack up the car now. I'm going to jack it up without the handbrake on, using my weightlifting shoe chocks. I'm going to keep the handbrake off for this job because the parking brake's attached to the rear brake calipers. So if you keep it on, then it'll be stuck to the disc. So parking brake off, jack it up. Better to be paranoid than have a car land on your face. So I'm going to take this wheel off now. So the wheel nut's off, the wheel seems to be stuck, so if that happens, just do this. Sorted. So now we're going to take the cap off the brake fluid reservoir, because when we wind the piston back, all of the brake fluid that's in the system is going to push its way up. So we're going to check the level. That looks alright. And because there's not a huge amount of volume in the rear calipers, I'm going to say that that's not going to overflow. But we'll keep an eye on it. Right, so there's a disc. There's the brake caliper, there's the pads. You can check the life of the pads through this wee hole at the top on some cars. There's the piston in there, and here's the pins which hold it in place. So we're going to undo these bolts at the back here, and for that you need to simultaneously hold these ones to detach the caliper. So basically that piston pushes out this way, and the pads are in there, and basically this whole thing clamps the pads onto the rotor, the disc. So I'm going to check the handbrake cable. So that's the handbrake. So when the handbrake goes on, this pushes down and basically activates these brakes. That's way up at the off position. But what I'm going to do anyway is I'm just going to disconnect this handbrake cable just in case. Right, so those required excessive force to get loosened. So I'm going to take these screws out, or bolts, and this side is the non-frozen side. So the other side, the piston was frozen, so that was a bit of a nightmare to get turned back in, but eventually I got it. So these brakes aren't overheating, the pads are a bit thicker, I think, so I reckon this one will be an easier one to get wound in. But we'll take this off and have a look. So there's the caliper off. This is the brake line, so you want to not damage that at all costs. That's the bleed nipple, which we're going to leave on this time. The pads actually look terrible, so you see all of this build up here. It's going to all need to be cleaned and lubricated with heat resistant lubricant. I mean, they look like they're fused in there. That's the caliper, there's the piston there, and you can see the little indents there, which we're going to use with the wind back tool to wind that in. So that caliper, that piston there shoots out this way. Where's my finger? Shoots out this way, and then this clamps down onto the pads and squeezes them onto the disc. On the front brakes I tied this up to the suspension at the top to protect this cable, so it wasn't, the weight of the caliper wasn't pulling on the cable. This is kind of tight here, so that can just be flung anywhere really, as long as this is safe. First casualty of the day. So let's take these pads off, get this all cleaned up. So these sit in here, so these little grooves. So you see if this comes out without a hammer. No, So these little grooves on the brake pads sit on here, and then these can slide along when the brakes are being operated or over time. So this all has to be nice and clean, otherwise they can get stuck and then the brakes can overheat or fail or whatever. So this all looks pretty horrible, so let's get these off, get this cleaned up, and we'll get the new pads on, then we'll wind this back. So I had to hammer them off of the seating. They look alright at first glance, but then when you compare them to the new ones, you can see they're actually pretty low. But these ones probably still have a little bit of life left in them. Because these new pads are thicker, there's obviously going to have to be more space inside the caliper, which is why we have to push the piston back. On the front, you just push it back with a C-clamp. It's really easy. On these ones, they have this really annoying widened back mechanism. So for that, you're pretty much going to have to use this specific tool for it. Otherwise it's near impossible, especially if it's seized. So we're going to clean these up, and then we're going to try and wind the piston back with this really cheap tool that's now broken since last time. So let's get that going. So wire brush, we're just going to clean out all this rust. These are solid blocks of metal, so you can pretty much just go at it with this, as long as the wire brush doesn't damage these rubber kind of wee boot things on the pins. So I'm going to test the pin movement and see if it's alright. So it moves okay there, and then it's moving nice there. So I'm just going to leave them. I'm not going to bother taking them apart because they're moving okay. So now we're just going to clean this all this crap up here, and then we're going to stick some copper grease on there. So right here, stick some copper grease on to lubricate it. So the pads go on here on these little slider bits, and they slide along there, so you just want to make sure that's as smooth as possible. So that's them cleaned up to an extent, and also going to grease these up, but you want to make sure that none of the flakes and fragments of rust that came off this when we cleaned it are going to get stuck in the braking system. So I can hear a couple little bits there, so I'm just going to have a look at this rust and then grease this up. So that's the kind of shit that might fall into your brakes and mess up your brakes. I'm just going to take all this rust off here. So now comes the pain in the arse bit. So I'm going to use this tool. These slot into the little notches in that piston there. I'll get it set up and then I'll show you. When you wind this back, all the brake fluid in the system is going to push back slightly, and it's going to move up in the reservoir, and the cap on the reservoir needs to be open, otherwise you'll be pushing against the resistance inside the closed system. I don't think it's going to overflow, but we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll just keep checking it here and make sure that it doesn't come up and out here. That is fairly high, so I think I might stick a towel in it, and just in case. So let's try and wind this back then. So teeth into those notches. There's a plate to push against that side of the inside of the caliper, and then you pretty much just wind this. I hope this goes clockwise, because I've heard some of them on one other side go anti-clockwise and the other side goes clockwise. If this goes anti-clockwise, I don't know what I'm going to do, but we'll try it now and see. Yeah, thankfully it winds in clockwise, so every time you wind this round, you have to kind of screw this to bring back the tension to push that out. Wind it a bit, screw this, wind it a bit, and it's a bit of a faff, but this one is moving easily compared to the other side, which was frozen. So by comparison, I think the other side, the caliper or the piston, there's something wrong with it. The other side I managed to get it freed up to an extent, but it was nowhere near as easy to shift as this. So far the brakes haven't overheated again, but I think as it winds out, as it pushes out, it's probably not going to keep coming back in on the other side, so probably going to have to either rebuild this or just get a new caliper installed. which is much more of a faff because then we need to mess about with the actual fluid, but we'll keep going with this for now. So managed to get enough space in there where I could go in with wire brush and clean up this piston end. So we'll see if that's enough space, and if not we'll keep winding it back. So the pads just go in here like that. So they're running along these little shelves here. These are gel backed pads. Apparently they don't need, I've heard they don't need greased, but I'm gonna just peel this off and grease them anyway. So stick these new ones on, let's see if we've got enough space. Right, finally that fits after a lot of effort, but I don't like how that's wound back further than the actual boot. So what I think I'm going to do is get all this greased up, stick this on without bolting it up, shift the boot out of the road, and then give the brakes a kick so that the piston shoots out into the back of the pads, and then check again to make sure the boot's not pinched in between the piston and the pads. So let's get these greased up then. Copper grease, too much copper grease. Copper grease, and don't get copper grease on your brake pad disc like I've just done, because that's really dumb. Okay, let's get these back on. Okay, so I've meticulously installed this so that the rubber bit, don't know if you can see it in there, the back is not pinched between the piston and the brake pad. Got some new bolts on there. So I'm going to tighten this up, and you're supposed to use a Newton meter wrench to tighten these to the spec torque, but I don't have that, so I'm just going to hand tighten them, and hopefully that does the job. I will say that this bolt here is annoyingly close to the brake line there, so I just need to watch that I don't slip off that and then knock this hose off, because that would be a disaster. So that looks to be like right at the max level here, but that's okay because once I get a bit of tension into the brakes, that will come down a wee bit, so that's about perfect. So now that's back together. That's the calipers floating nicely on the pins. Don't know if you can see that there, but that all looks smooth. Now I'm going to reconnect the handbrake. The handbrake reconnected. So the handbrake will be pointing towards the sky until we get some tension, some proper tension back in the brakes. So I'm going to stick the wheel back on. And then that's us. So I usually jack the car down until the tyres pressing against the ground, tighten these up in opposites, and then stick the car down and then tighten them up harder. Handbrake pointing to the moon. I'm going to kick the brake. It's better.